In this part of our series, we'll give some exclusive focus to the larger reference to Jesus in the Antiquities of Josephus, a reference that has come to be known as the Testimonium. I'll begin by stating outright what my conclusion will be, that the Testimonium is generally authentic, although with some Christian glosses, meaning not that certain phrases were maliciously interpolated, but that they were inadvertently added based on marginal notes in the text by a reader of Josephus. That's not uncommon as a proposed phenomenon of textual transmission. For this study, we'll run through the Testimonium sentence by sentence, sometimes even phrase by phrase, discussing arguments for and against the authenticity of each part of it. But before we do that, I'll make one note which is not so much an argument as an observation. A survey of scholarship on this subject reveals that the significant majority of scholars argue for the same view I will here, what's sometimes called the partial interpolation theory. This includes a number of scholars who would otherwise have little interest in defending Orthodox Christianity. To sum up, here's the consensus. The Testimonium as we now have it is this. Combining the scholarly consensus, the original Testimonium would have looked like this. There's some variation on particulars, but we'll discuss those as we go along. In deciding what parts of the Testimonium are original to Josephus, scholars generally look for words and phrases consistent with Josephus's language and style, and are also looking to see if they are in any sense interrupting the flow of the passage in an intolerable way. In this, they are mirroring these criteria offered by Walker for detecting interpolation, and using them in reverse, we could say. As an opener, this phrase has Josephus's fingerprints all over it. You can find plenty of examples of it in the Antiquities. The use of the simple name Jesus also favors Josephan authorship, as we find that Christian authors overwhelmingly use either Jesus Christ or Christ Jesus, or some other divine addendum, and almost never use Jesus by itself, as these examples show. Wise man is a characteristically Josephine phrase, one used by Josephus to describe both King Solomon and Daniel. That's appropriate inasmuch as both men were seen not only as repositories of wisdom, but as possessors of the sort of miraculous abilities Jesus is also reported as possessing later in the Testimonium. On the other hand, despite the seeming positive connotation, it's not really the sort of term that a Christian would use to describe Jesus, as indeed early Christians never used the phrase wise man of Jesus. That's because of these unfavorable statements made about the reputedly wise in the New Testament. On the other hand, the second part of this phrase is generally seen as a Christian gloss, because it's supposed to be effecting a response to what would have been seen by a Christian as an insufficient description of Jesus, who would think that Jesus was just a wise man. The phrase wonderful works is typical of Josephus, as he uses it also to describe works done by Moses and Elisha. But it can have a double meaning. The word wonderful here is this Greek word. As you can guess from the modern English word it resembles, it has a wider semantic range than we'd expect. It can mean startling or incredible, but it also has a negative connotation where it can mean controversial. For this reason, it's not surprising that Christians never describe Jesus' miracles using this exact word. Additionally, although Josephus does use this word to describe miracles of Moses and Elisha, in both of those cases he attributes their miracles to God, whereas he doesn't do this when referring to Jesus, and that speaks against the hand of a Christian interpolator. The phrase with pleasure is also characteristic of Josephus, especially in books 17 through 19 of the Antiquities, which some believe were actually written by one of Josephus's scribes at his behest. It does sound positive, of course, but it's not the sort of thing a Christian interpolator would write, because here again, one of the key words, pleasure, had a negative connotation of hedonism in the New Testament and in early Christian writings. This one's fairly easy to attribute to Josephus, since on the surface it contradicts the portrait of Jesus' ministry in the Gospels, which do not have Jesus evangelizing Gentiles, and place the evangelization of the Gentiles in the future, after Jesus' ministry. As he has it, Josephus' words suggest that Jesus drew as many Gentile followers as he did Jewish ones, a social condition as it happens that would have described Christianity in the time when Josephus was writing. If any part of the Testimonium is easy to designate as an interpolation or gloss, it would have to be this one, for of course it reflects something Josephus as a Jew would not have believed. That said, it's been proposed that Josephus' original words were something like this. That would mirror what he also said in his shorter reference to Jesus, as well as making what he says more non-committal. This portion of the Testimonium would be used by either a Jewish historian or a Christian familiar with the Gospel narratives. But the reference to principal men is very common in Josephus, and has no counterpart in the Gospels or in any other early Christian literature. A Christian would be much more likely to refer to the Jews, or the Sanhedrin, or even the Sadducees or the Pharisees. Perhaps not coincidentally, principal men is also used most frequently in Book 18 of the Antiquities, which points to the work of one of Josephus' hired scribes. There's been some discussion over this phrase because while it partly sounds like what Josephus has written elsewhere, it ends somewhat awkwardly. But as it happens, awkward drop-offs like this aren't uncommon for him. Well, yes, we don't really need to discuss this one, do we? Or maybe we do, because it does contain some phrases that are characteristic of Josephus, like divine prophets. In light of this, at least one scholar has proposed that Josephus' original text included a qualification. As we now have it, though, is clearly not original to Josephus. The phrase "the tribe of" is typical and perhaps even unique to Josephus. His use of the word overall can be quite strange. He uses it of things as different as the Jews themselves, to other races of people, to a swarm of locusts. Christians didn't use the term of themselves, not until Eusebius did, and probably under the influence of Josephus. So in summary, what does the evidence indicate? It tells us that a substantial amount of the Testimonium is characteristically Josephine, while very little is obviously Christian. It also shows us that the Testimonium lacks distinctive Christian terminology, and uses words and phrases that Christians would have avoided using. Finally, we even have a part that seems contrary to what is written in the Gospels. Taken together, this all means that, yes.
Alright, so it sounds a lot like Josephus would have written it. Big deal. That just proves that the forger was real good at what he was doing.
That's coming pretty close to paranoid as an objection, but we'll take it seriously anyway, in one of the later parts of this series.